Imagine waking up one day and finding out that your bank has failed, that your savings have evaporated, that you can no longer pay your bills, your mortgage, your groceries, that the economy has come to a halt and that no one can help you. This scenario is not science fiction, but it is what could happen if the modern banking system went into crisis. And unfortunately, there are signs that this crisis has already begun. In recent months, we have witnessed the collapse of some important banks, both in the United States and in Europe. Banks that seemed solid and reliable, but that turned out to be fragile and vulnerable. The first to fall was Silicon Valley Bank, one of the main American banks specialized in financing technology startups. On March 10, 2023, the bank announced that it was insolvent due to a series of bad loans and a loss of liquidity. The failure triggered a chain reaction that involved two other regional U.S. banks, First National Bank of Omaha and Texas Bank. But the hardest blow came from Switzerland, where Credit Suisse, one of the largest investment banks in the world, suffered a loss of $16 billion due to a wrong financial operation with an American hedge fund called Ichigos Capital Management. Credit Suisse had to write off its subordinated bonds, AT1, a form of debt that absorbs losses in case of crisis, and asked for the intervention of the state to avoid bankruptcy. These news shook the financial markets and caused the shares of banks around the world to plummet. In particular, European banks were hit hard, starting with the German giant Deutsche Bank, which saw the cost of default insurance rise to 4-year highs. Italian banks also suffered, with drops of 7% for Commerzbank, 5% for BNP Paribas, and 4% for UniCredit and Intesa Sanpaolo. But why did these banks fail or are at risk? What are the causes of the crisis? And most importantly, what can we do as citizens to protect ourselves from this threat? In this video, we will try to answer these questions, analyzing the origins and consequences of the banking crisis, and giving some practical advice on how to manage our savings and investments. To better understand what is happening to banks, we need to take a step back and remember how the modern banking system works. Banks play a fundamental role in the economy because they create liquidity and credit. In practice, banks take money from savers and lend it to businesses, consumers, and governments, asking for interest in return. In this way, banks foster economic and social development. However, this mechanism also has risks. The first is liquidity risk. Banks lend money for long term, but they have to return it to savers for short term. If all savers asked for their money back at the same time, banks would not be able to meet the demand and would go bankrupt. This phenomenon is called bank run or run on the bank, and is what happened to Silicon Valley Bank and the other two American banks. The second risk is credit risk. Banks lend money to subjects who may not be able to repay it. If loans become uncollectible, banks lose capital and profitability. This phenomenon is called bad debts or impaired loans, and is what affected Credit Suisse and other European banks. The third risk is contagion risk. Banks are interconnected with each other through the interbank market, where they exchange liquidity and securities. If one bank fails or gets into trouble, it can transmit its problems to other banks, creating a systemic crisis. This phenomenon is called domino effect and is what sparked panic in the financial markets. As we can see, the modern banking system is based on trust. Trust of savers in banks, trust of banks in loans, trust of banks among themselves. If this trust is lost, the system can collapse. But this is not the first time it happens. History teaches us that banking crises are recurrent and have always had serious consequences on the economy and society. Just think of the Great Depression of 1929, the emerging countries crisis of 1997, the subprime crisis of 2008. In all these cases, banks had a central role in causing or amplifying the crisis. So, what can we do to avoid being overwhelmed by this new wave of financial instability? What are the precautions that we can take to safeguard our interests and rights? First of all, we need to be informed and aware. We should not be scared by sensational news or false promises. We should look for reliable and competent sources that help us understand what is happening and what are the opportunities and risks that await us. Secondly, we need to be prudent and diversified. We should not put all our money in one bank or in one type of investment. We should distribute our savings among different banks and different financial instruments, taking into account our risk profile and our objectives. In this way, we reduce the risk of losing everything in case of failure or market collapse. Thirdly, we need to be active and responsible. We should not delegate our financial choices to third parties or algorithms. We should constantly monitor our investments and evaluate whether they are still suitable for our needs and market conditions. We should also exercise our rights as customers and citizens, asking for transparency and protection from banks and competent authorities. These are just some of the tips that we can give you to face the banking crisis with serenity and security. If you want to learn more about the topic and discover other strategies to manage your money better, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, Finanza di Nietzsche, where you will find many other interesting and useful videos. Thank you for following us until the end, and see you next time.